Please welcome David Owen.
All right, here I am. How is everybody? I'm going to talk about golf, but first, we get to. Oops, I'm advancing it through the wrong thing. Golf is the main thing I think about, but it's not the only thing I write about. And if we could get to my first slide, it would be good. There was when I started playing golf when I was 36, and I went sort of. Oh, here we go. I went sort of overnight from never thinking about golf to thinking about nothing but. But I also write about other things. And about 10 years ago, I was on a New Yorker assignment in South America. I went to Colombia, to Bogota, and two women and an old Toyota picked me up at my hotel and drove me to a sort of industrial park on the outskirts of Bogota. And there, the man that I had come to interview shot me in the stomach with a .38 caliber revolver from about 8 inches away. And luckily, he... What should I point at? His name was Miguel Caballero, and fortunately, he was in the business of making fashionable bulletproof clothing for people. So I was wearing one of his jackets. I was wearing a black suede bulletproof jacket. And if we can get to my slide.
One moment.
I'll show you. Made in Colombia, he was in the business. What he invented was a very thin bulletproof material, sort of like Kevlar, but not Kevlar. And Kevlar is a DuPont product. That, oh, here we go. Here he's shooting me in the stomach with my jacket on. And I later talked to some engineers at Kevlar, and they were explaining to me how Kevlar works. And I finally said, so am I the only person here who's actually been shot in one of these things? And they were both silent. They fell silent. And they said, you know, we don't really even call Kevlar bulletproof. We call it bullet resistant. And he said they don't test it on humans, not even on journalists. But the guy, Caballero, does make a golf shirt. This is about a $15,000 bulletproof golf shirt, which you can buy from them in case you feel threatened on the golf course. I belong to what happens to be the greatest golf club in the world. I'm sure you have nice ones here, but mine in Connecticut is the best in the world. This is some of the founding documents. It was founded in 1889. The oldest golf club in the United States, the oldest continuously operating one, is said to be St. Andrews in Yonkers, New York. This is said to be the oldest photograph of golf being played in the United States, taken at St. Andrews in 1889. 1888. My golf club was founded a year later. This was the home of one of the founders, and you can see just to the left of the house, there's a little light roof there. That was his golf house. They teed off there. The longest hole was, they played downhill into a sheep meadow, and the longest hole was probably about 200 yards. My golf club in 1903, they had an equipment problem. The ball was going too far, the Haskell rubber ball, so they bought a piece of property, 40 acres on the other side of town, and moved the golf course over there. This was the original clubhouse. This is a photograph was taken in 1925. You notice that in the photograph, only the caddies are wearing neckties. The pro is the guy at the far right. The littlest boy sitting in the front row in the middle was the father of the head pro when I joined in 1991, and he was still sort of hanging around. In my town, there was an heir to the singer fortune lived in my town, and his daughter married Horton Smith. It's his daughter over at the far end there. She married Horton Smith, who won the first and third Masters tournaments. And the wedding was held in my little town, and there was a wedding party at our little 9-hole golf course. And the wedding guests included Titanic Thompson and Light Horse Harry Cooper, and a guy that I sometimes play golf with, caddied for Titanic Thompson and one of the other guys who now dead, but he caddied for the rich guy on the right, he would come to the golf course. He had he had a bag of range balls. He would hit 30 balls. The kid would field them, count to 30, run back. He'd hit 30 balls again. Then he'd play the first hole, chip to the 8th green, play the 9th hole, do that again, and go home. He was one of the founders of he was one of the money bags behind the Augusta National Golf Club when they started in 1931. This is our clubhouse today. It incorporates actually that shack that I showed you a couple of slides ago. You can see it over at the right. We did some shingle work, and there's the shack still in there to the right. That's now mostly the women's locker room. It's called Washington Golf Club. It's just a little town club. In the expanded part, the big part to the left, was added in about in the 19-teens, when the golf club they made a swap with a local boarding school. They swapped this tennis court for what had been a fraternity house, and used an ox cart to pull the fraternity house over the golf club and smushed it onto the existing golf club. And the house that you see there, the house that you see there right above the tennis court was the clubhouse of the entire club, not at the golf course, but it's my house now. It's in a different place. In 1970, the guy that my wife and I bought it from moved it on the back of a big truck down a road and down past some trees to the spot where it is now. He bought it for $1 from the boarding school. They had been going to tear it down. It was built in 1790, and my wife and I still live there. These are some of my friends. We have a regular men's golf group. We play at 7 o'clock in the morning every Sunday. We're posing there. You can't quite see it, on a tree. There's the tree that we're standing on. During a tournament that we were playing in the fall, there was this. I was on the second green and heard this enormous crash, and it turned out to be this tree falling over right next to the first tee. It crushed 2 golf carts, and fortunately, no golfers. A group hadn't reached the tee yet, and another group had just left. So anyway, we got 2 new free golf carts out of it. My Sunday morning group, which is called the Sunday Morning Group, we meet at the golf club every Sunday morning at 7:30. Whoever shows up plays. We make teams by drawing numbered poker chips out of a hat. And we used to have a terrible problem figuring out how many people were there. It's hard to get golfers to stand still long enough to count them. But 2 years ago, I had this great mental breakthrough, which was that you count golf bags instead of golfers, because the golf bags stay in one place. It was similar to a mental breakthrough I had when I was getting ready to take a golf trip to Scotland, and I had to be sure my travel bag weighed less than 50 pounds. And I thought, God, I don't want to haul this upstairs. And I realized that I could bring the scale from the bathroom upstairs down to the living room. And same concept. We sometimes, when the course isn't crowded, we sometimes play as a ninesome. I think that's an eightsome. The main feature of my golf club, really the best feature of my golf club, is that it has no restaurant. You can't get food there. You can't get a drink. Instead, we take turns, the Sunday group, bringing lunch for everybody. We have some rules about lunch. Initially, there could be nothing that could be considered a salad. It was all hamburgers and hot dogs. People have gotten a little bit more lenient since then, but not much. There's what the preparation looks like. We have a little grill. You bring lunch once in a year and you're done. You bring lunch for 25 or 30 guys. This is Slade, who's the oldest member of the group at the moment. He's almost 90, not quite. He still not only walks but carries his bag. He doesn't like push carts. Almost all our services are supplied within the group. There's an architect in the group, and when we did a little clubhouse renovation, he managed it, and he renovated the men's bathroom. And one of the things that he did was put a window right over the urinal, and the window faces right onto the grill, so you can go inside and use the bathroom without missing out on anything that's going on outside. we have when our games end in ties, we have playoffs, and everybody by then is drinking beer, and nobody wants to go back out on the golf course. So all our playoffs are around the putting green. The one on your left, the guy on the left there is Stanley. He's a retired post office guy. The playoff that we have there is lob shots from the back of Fritz's pickup truck onto the putting green, which is about 15 yards that way. So you put your ball in the liner and then hit a lob wedge and try to get it up and keep it on. The playoff on the right was foot wedges to the same green. You had to place your ball on the ground and sort of look furtively this way and that, and then without looking at it, kick your ball onto the green. There's Stanley again. This was sitting on a chair on top of the picnic table, and it was a overhand throw over your shoulder backwards onto the putting green closest to the pin. This one was a lob shot off the carpet in the bag room, over the first tee, over a fence, and then onto the putting green. These guys were in the flight path of the ball, hiding behind the fence to protect themselves. This playoff was a wrong-handed overhand throw over the fence onto the putting green. It's much harder to do than you'd think, and so I had videos of it, and everybody looked sort of like that. The guy who won was a former baseball player who was a switch hitter. This playoff, that's the men's room window that I showed you before, and this playoff was a throw front. You can just see the putting green from the men's room window, and this was a throw from that window, and that's Lester, and he's actually standing in the urinal, which gave him an advantage, and he won that one. The group is about 20 years old now, and one of the things that I like about golf is there's this sort of conveyor belt quality to it. There are kids who started as caddies, and now they have kids of their own, and this sort of marches along, and guys die and fall off one end, and then other guys come along in the other. And a guy who died recently is Harry, who's on the far right here. This is at Pine Valley, which is often rated in Golf Digest as the #1 golf course in the world. And that's a bunker called the Devil's Asshole on the 10th hole, a par 3. And people who know the golf course, if they hit into that bunker from the tee, will declare their ball unplayable and hit another because you can't get out of it. It's Harry on the right. Harry died, and his widow sent us half of his ashes. There was about a person burns down to about 6 pounds worth of ashes, and she sent us 3 pounds of Harry. So we had to figure out what to do with him. This is our spiritual leader, Bob Hacker, and although our clubhouse doesn't have a restaurant, it has a kitchen, and so he found a baggie and a big serving spoon, and we put some of Harry under the patio where we have lunch. I've picked out one of the bluestone pavers for myself. And we took Harry with us on a golf trip to Atlantic City, where we go every fall, and left some of him down there. We've taken this. It was a guy. The guy in the middle of that photograph is named Peter, and he's an artist, and he's still alive, but almost wasn't. He was in a terrible car accident and was in intensive care for weeks, and he missed our annual. He was going to miss our annual Atlantic City trip, but we took him anyway, and the way we did it was on the left there you can see we printed a big picture of him and put it on some foam core and cut it out and took him, and he met this waitress at one of the bars that we went to, and with both Harry and Peter, we figured out ways to include them in the competition. They actually competed. We gave them hole scores based on their handicap, on their normal handicap, and they actually participated in the tournaments. I think Peter even won some money. We have a sort of a limited selection of branded merchandise, including these wristbands, which I've eventually lost mine, but we had them for a while. I don't know if they're kind of small in this photograph, but we have little bumper stickers on our cars, so you sometimes spot somebody in the group because of the bumper sticker on their car. And we have these Jägermeister sweatshirts that are sort of our most important sponsor is Jägermeister, And we talked them into giving us these sweatshirts, and you can see that everybody's name has an umlaut on it, and then the Sunday morning group does too, the words there. And everybody is very proud of their Jägermeister jacket, and we call our winter tournament the Jägermeister Cup. We have a trophy. Even though Jägermeister is really foul. I don't know if it tastes like cough syrup with kerosene in it, maybe. This is Gene. We had just finished a round of golf. It started snowing when we were on the 18th hole, and he was warming up with Jägermeister. And I don't know if you can see the horrified expression on his face as he tasted, but he didn't like it one bit. We also have, this is actually just a fake tattoo, but I had this idea that during our member guest, what we should do some year is have a tattoo artist come and offer free tattoos to everybody, because once all the guys got drunk enough, I figured there'd probably be a lot of takers, but that's just a temporary one. This is a photo from the member guest. These are two guys, because they overindulge on the first night, they stay in a sort of an old camper at the house of our course superintendent. They sleep there, and so they don't have access to a shower. So this is a shower in one of the water coolers on the golf course the next day. One of the guys was the guy who was giving the shower, not taking the shower, invented a sound system in a golf cart. And what you do is you put your phone in one of the cup holders, and it acts as an amplifier. It makes it much louder. So he can annoy more people than he ordinarily does. I figured out a way to do basically the same thing with my sinuses. If you put I put the earbuds from an iPod in my nostrils and then opened my mouth very wide, and had sort of the same effect. It turns your mouth into almost kind of a boombox. I actually learned that from my niece. This on the left is an invention of mine. It's a problem in golf is you're playing a partner, or your opponent asks you to move your golf ball so you can putt, and you do it, and then you forget to put it back. But if you put a T in your nose once you've moved your ball, you always remember. And so that's what I do. On the right are an invention of ours are waterproof scorecards. You can write on them underwater with an ordinary pencil, and you can erase them with a regular eraser, even when they're underwater. And they're also good for when it's very sweaty, because they take care of perspiration too. And the secret is that they're printed on synthetic paper. It's a polypropylene fake paper. This is another invention of mine. I would guess that almost everybody here, at least the men, are aware of this. I think it's viewed as a feature. It's a tiny pocket inside a pocket. You have a pair of shorts, and there's a tiny little pocket down at the bottom for some unknown reason. And all it does is become impacted with ball markers and tees, and you can't get them out. So this is an operation that I invented. It's a radical pocketectomy, where you carefully incise and resect the little pocket. I once played golf with a guy who was the leading practitioner in the United States of what's called the Whipple Procedure, which is for an operation for pancreatic cancer, and this is the Owen procedure. The Sunday morning group, every couple of years we've taken a trip to Scotland or Ireland or England. This was a trip to Scotland, where we stayed for a couple of nights in a rented house in St. Andrews, just around the corner from the old course. And it had an artificial putting green in the backyard, and so we had a putting contest there. This was a trip we took a couple of years ago to Ireland, and this is sort of in the middle of Ireland, in a lake country in the middle of Ireland, a beautiful place. The lodge that we stayed in was just to the left in this picture. This is initially we always rented cars, and this is how we've gotten very good at this spatial orientation, three-dimensional, packing cars efficiently with two small foreign cars with lots of golf bags. So that's what one of the cars looked like. But more recently, we've had hired drivers and vans, and much more fun. You can play cards, and there's a beer cooler, and nobody has to remember where we're going. And then just a couple of years ago, we took a golf trip where we started out in Scotland. At Troon, we took a chartered boat from Troon to Machrihanish, and we played there for a few days. And then we took the same chartered boat to Northern Ireland, and we had to put on life vests here. But I think in a lot of ways, the boat ride was one of the highlights of the trip. And it wasn't expensive, and it saved us like an endless car drive to get from the main part of Scotland to Machrihanish, which is way out on the Kintyre Peninsula. This photograph was also in Ireland. This is at a course called Baltray, and this is a friend of mine, and he's smoking a cigarette. I think he really only smokes when he's playing golf. But so his wife did not recognize what he was doing in this photograph and thought her guess was that he was drinking from a juice box when she first thought it, but he's taking a Marlboro out of a pack. He's one that we have in our golf group. We have an unusually many guys named Mike, and we have unusually many lawyers. This is one of the lawyers, and there's no overlap between the Mikes and the lawyers for unknown reasons. We don't need to go abroad to find bad weather. This was, we'd had a big rain in Connecticut, and the body of water you see there is ordinarily a stream that you can step across, but it had grown to lake size, but we decided to play anyway. And there we are, suited up for our, for our rainy day of golf. These hats are from Outdoor Research. I think somebody in this room is wearing an Outdoor Research jacket, and I highly recommend their rain hats. I saw the logo from behind. That very day, he's holding a crawdad that we found walking across the 9th fairway, which is nowhere near any body of water, but it was a very wet day. And that's what my hands looked like at the end of the round. I also have played in the snow. In fact, you see the snowshoes that I'm wearing in that picture on the left are snowshoes that I bought to play golf in. I've never used them for anything but golf. And I don't play in the snow anymore because the 4 guys that I played with are all dead now. They called themselves the fuckheads, which was what their principal term of endearment for one another. And they sort of dropped dead one by one, but until they were all gone, we played golf in the snow. Which a sport that was invented by Rudyard Kipling, of all people. He used to paint golf balls red. He had a house in, I think, Vermont, and he would hit red painted golf balls down the hill in front of his house. After the fuckheads were all gone, we switched. In the winter, we switched our golf over to bowling, and we transferred all our games over. We found a way to calculate handicaps, to play all our regular games, and to still have skins. We still played skins. And we even figured out a way to play alternate shot. And we did that for a number of years. And I had I don't know if you can tell, but the golf ball that I'm holding there was my spare ball. I had 2 balls. That was my spare ball. It didn't spin very much, but it looked like a golf ball. It had dimples. Then we discovered that in the city of New York, there are a dozen golf courses owned by the city that stay open all winter long as there's no snow on the ground. And we began what we call going south to play golf during the winter. It's about a 2-hour drive from where we live. And we played in the Bronx and in Brooklyn. And often when we would leave home, there would be snow on the ground. That's Nick, who has sort of retired from our golf group. But it was snow. There was snow where we were, but by the time we got to New York, it was nice. This is in the Bronx. This is a city course in the Bronx. There are actually 2. One called Pelham Bay and one called Split Rock. And to get from Pelham Bay to Split Rock, you walk under the Metro North railroad tracks. And they're both really terrific golf courses, more than 100 years old. This is Dyker Beach Golf Course in Brooklyn, and that's the Verrazano-Narrows Bridge, another terrific course, where we've often played on New Year's Day. For many years, we've played on either New Year's Eve or New Year's Day, and you can see the kind of conditions we sometimes play in. That's my push cart, and it's on a puddle that it didn't sink into. This was New Year's Day a couple of years ago at a golf course in Connecticut, and one of the guys came in a tuxedo. One year, there was no open grass anywhere in New York or Connecticut, anywhere in New York City or Connecticut, and we thought for a while that we might have to drive north to Buffalo to find an open golf course, but then discovered that just outside Atlantic City at a wonderful resort called the Seaview, it was actually open, and so 3 of us went and played there. It was as much unlimited golf in a room at the wonderful lodge for $170. We had a great time. We literally had the golf course to ourselves for 2 days, and this is why. It was like being John Daly because the drives were going 400 yards because the fairways were frozen solid, but we played. In my golf group, we have a rule that if you wear shorts after November 1st, you get an extra handicap stroke, and if you wear shorts after December 1st, you get 2 extra handicap strokes. So there are a group of us in shorts for our extra handicap strokes. We sometimes play at night with glowing balls. The balls used to have a little insert, like a little glow stick insert, and now they make these remarkable golf balls with LEDs embedded in them. You knock 2 of them together, the light stays on. It stays on for about 8 minutes, so it's lit up till you get to it, and then you hit it again, and the light comes back on. And that's one of our night games. I mentioned earlier that we have all our services are provided from within the group, and one of the guys in the group works for a company that prints things on T-shirts, and they have the technology now to print photographs on T-shirts. And so for the member guest, one year, he made T-shirts for him and his partner featuring a photograph from the member guest the previous year of 2 other guys who were playing poker, losing lots of money, and no longer almost able to sit up straight. So that was on the backs of their T-shirts. About a dozen years ago, we had what I've thought of ever since as the golden summer. There was one day when 4 of us, it was a very hot day in July, and 4 of us decided to cool off by going swimming in the pond on the 4th hole in our underwear. And we had later that summer, we had a sleepover. The Sunday morning group came, and we played golf in the afternoon, and we cooked steaks on the in the parking lot behind the clubhouse while we waited for it to get dark. Then we played night golf. Then we played cards. Then we got up in the morning. We played golf again. And this was the setup that one of the guys had in the parking lot. Everybody snores, and so it was like a geometry problem to try to space everybody out as far as possible from everybody else. And lots of guys slept in their cars. This was at about the same time. Something else I got in trouble in on the right is Golf Digest sent me and 3 of my buddies from home to Las Vegas to study the effect of alcohol on the golf swing, and we played. Part of the experiment was it was very scientific. We had guys in white lab coats and with clipboards and things, but part of the experiment was the 4 of us played golf against. That's Jimmy Kimmel lying on the ground there, and Adam Carolla. Back when they were the Man Show guy, their show was the Man Show before Jimmy Kimmel became quite as famous as he is now. And those are 2 of my friends on the right. And Kimmel was after we had drunk, my friends and I had drunk a dozen beers apiece, and they'd been drinking for days, so I don't even know how much they'd had. That we had some, we meant to have a breathalyzer. We had some little test strips, alcohol test strips, and they have on the back, they have a little, it's like pregnancy test. It shows you with different colors how I don't know, how much alcohol you've consumed. And theirs turned a color that wasn't on the box. It wasn't even off the box. It was like black. It was never seen before. Anyway, you can see I came over the top, but I didn't hit him. And the photograph on the left is from a Golf Digest story where I was sent to Pebble Beach to play from the open tees and try to break 100, and I didn't do it. This was a golf course in Scotland called Cullen, one of my favorite golf courses. Americans never go there. I played there once. I went back the next year, and I was looking through the sign-in book, and the most recent American before me was me from a year before in the guest book. The first time I played there was on a Golf Digest assignment where I went and flew to Scotland and with my golf bag and no itinerary, and the idea was just to play golf courses I'd never heard of before. And every place I played, I would ask, where should I go next? And Cullen was one of them. These guys were guys on a field trip from another golf course I'd never heard of before called Hopeman, which I also played. And the wind was blowing, so you can see how hard the wind was blowing. That flag on the left is tipped over almost like this. These guys' golf bags kept blowing over and then actually rolling on the ground. And when they did, there was this horrible clinking of all the beer bottles inside them. And when they let me join them, they were playing a scramble. At one point, one of them asked his playing, he said, "What hole new?" And none of them could understand. I was the only one who could understand him. He asked, "What hole are we on now?" And I knew we were on the 17th. So, but I was the only one who knew what he had said. Probably the best golf writing assignment I've ever had was 20 plus years ago. Augusta National Golf Club asked me to write a sort of a history of the club, really a biography of Clifford Roberts, the co-founder of the club. The chairman at the time, a guy named Jack Stevens, was worried that all the members who had known Roberts when he was alive they were going to die soon, and there would be nobody left who had actually known him, and all that would be left would be these sort of fanciful stories that sports writers tell about him. So I had complete access to the club's archives and members for a couple of years, and I would go down and I'd stay at the club. And when Stevens had me come to Little Rock to meet him to make sure I was okay, and we talked about money and we agreed on a sum, and I said, Mr. Stevens, my real interest in this assignment is to play the golf course. And he said, "Well, you can play it." And I said, "Well, I'd really like to play it a lot." And so he said I could play it as often as I wanted to, and I did. So every time I would go down and I would work in the morning, and then I would go to the driving range, and my caddy would be there, and we'd go out and play, and it was great. There were tears in my eyes when I finished. This was Clifford Roberts in the back left, the co-founder. He had the worst childhood in the history of America. He's always talked about it as the rich co-founder of the club, but he was poor, and it was his sort of obsessive attention to detail that made the Masters what it is. That's Alistair McKenzie on the right, who designed the golf course. That's at Cypress Point, and that's Alistair and his wife, and you can see she's holding an old box camera. One thing, people who look at Augusta National now and look at the Masters assume that they've both always been huge successes, but it's not the case. They struggled. They started in 1931 during the Great Depression. They managed, after a couple of years of efforts, they had I think it was 76 members. They sent out thousands and thousands and thousands of postcards like this, of invitations to people. When Roberts would see a newspaper article about golf, he would send letters to everybody. Anybody who passed through, they tried to get him to sign up. It only cost, the annual dues were $65. It only cost $300 to join, and literally no one for years joined the club. What finally sort of got it going, it was the reason that, in fact, that they decided to hold their own golf tournament, was the hope to kind of put the club on the map, the club. And they first tried to get a U.S. Open, but the USGA said they weren't ready for it, so they said, well, we'll have our own tournament. To do that, they needed to get Bobby Jones to play in it, because he was the pull. And this is something we found when I was doing research on the book, was this color photograph of Jones from 1947, I think, early color photography. The photograph was in the bottom. It was a group of negatives in the bottom of a file cabinet. Nobody had seen it since it was taken. It was, as far as we know, it had never been printed anywhere. But it's this wonderful photograph. Initially, this is on the right is a sort of a property map of the Augusta National property that was made by when the club was founding, to sell. They wanted to sell real estate. You could have bought a building lot overlooking the golf course for a few $100s. In more than 20 years of trying to sell building lots, they sold one, or they sold two to the same guy beyond the first green, and eventually tore that house down. Nobody was interested. They tried leasing it. They subdivided a little sort of middle-class suburban subdivision next to course. They couldn't get real estate agents to call them back. So if we could go back in time with a couple of $1,000, that would be a good thing to invest in. During the war, Bobby Jones had the idea of grazing cattle on the golf course, which they did. They had a herd of almost 200 head of cattle on the golf course, and it ended up being a terrible idea. They ate all the azaleas, and the guy who was the caddy master when I was working on my book said that when he was a kid, he and his brother used to sneak on the course to go swimming in Ray's Creek, and he said after the war you'd see these perfectly round, bright green circles all over the course, which is where the cow flops had been. This is, if you remember the 8th hole, it's a par 5 that runs up a hill, and Tiger and a few other people can get on it in 2, and it has these wonderful mounds on either side of it. It's a beautiful hole. Roberts decided that at some point that spectators couldn't see well enough. His concern was always the fan experience, the patron experience at the Masters, and so he took out the mounds and redid the green like this, just like this Muni push-up green, which is what the 8th green looked like at the Masters for many years until they finally replaced it. They didn't have any diagrams of what the mounds had been like before, but there was a member there who, as a kid, during the war, had ridden a motorbike over the golf course, and he said that he retained a sort of physical memory of the mounds in his rear end, and he was a consultant on the project because he used to ride his motorbike over them when they recreated them. In 1998, when I was working on my book, this was the Sunday before the 1998 Masters. I played golf with Hootie Johnson, who wasn't quite yet the chairman, and Warren Stevens, who was the son of the chairman, and Lance Barrow, who was the CBS producer. It was the media versus the Green Jackets, and Lance and I were losing until we got to the 16th hole, and I birdied 17, and eagled 18. I played the last 3 holes at 4 under par, and we beat them. And they gave me this little my birdie eagle trophy. It was my greatest achievement in golf. But even though I had a great time there, what I look forward to is coming home to my golf. This is the regular golf group, and you see everybody is flipping the bird. This was a photograph that we took for Peter Poskis, the guy who was in intensive care for so long, because we were giving him our standard greeting, and I'm sure it made him feel better, I'm pretty sure. And I'll finish, and we'll have room for a couple questions with I mentioned, I think this will start by itself maybe. Oop, no. Yeah. Can we go back to that last one and make it run? Maybe not. If there are questions, I'd be happy to answer them. Oh, pardon me? I wrote about playing with Donald Trump, which I can tell you about if you want. I don't think he thinks of it as cheating. I almost, when I arrived at, this was 6 years ago, it was for a story for Golf Digest. When I arrived at Trump International in Palm Beach, I pulled up in the front of the club, and I was going to I had a rented key, and I was going to drop my clubs at the bag drop. And there was an attendant there, was a guy in a white hat and a white shirt and white pants. So I palmed a $5 bill, and I got out of my car. And just as I was about to hand him the tip, I realized that it was Trump. He'd come out to greet me because it had been announced at the gate that I was there. And so I managed to get the bill back in my pocket. But we spent the day together, and I stayed at Mar-a-Lago that night. And you would not have guessed that he would be where he is today, based on my experience with him. He was very upset. He was upset about the article I wrote about him, even though I said Golf Digest at the time thought that Trump was like the last rich guy in America who believed that golf. He was like Rupert Murdoch for the printed word. He was the last possible savior for golf. He still had faith in golf, and so Golf Digest was interested in him. But he wasn't angry. I said there were 2 little girls, 10-year-old girls. He asked them if they wanted to be supermodels when they grew up, and then asked them to kiss him. he wasn't angry about that. And Vic Damone, the crooner, was there, and his wife was dying of cancer, and Trump was sort of consoling him in the locker room by saying, he said, I'd be happy to appear as a character witness for you if her children try to cut you out of her estate, which was sort of his version of, I think he was being, brotherly. But what he was upset about was that I had not said that he had shot 71, and the reason in the story, and the reason I hadn't was that he hadn't. I mean, we were playing. It wasn't that we were just playing casually. We weren't putting things out or anything like that. But he called me on my cell phone. I was in New York City. I was standing in a cemetery, in fact, and being screamed at by me, screamed at the editor of Golf Digest. But I think that was what he was focused on, that number. He wanted that number. As I say, you would not have guessed, based on everything he talked about was money. He introduced us. This is the richest guy in Germany. This is the, and people were happy to be introduced that way. He described Palm Beach to me as, he said, this is the richest place in the country in terms of wealth. And so that was, he added at least 1 0 to every number that he gave. So he would describe, he would say, this is a $500,000 tree, when it was. But then he would say, of course, I paid much less for it. So he sort of wanted both. He wanted you to know that it was really expensive, but also that that it had been really cheap, because he was the one who bought it. But it's kind of 1 order of magnitude was pretty much the way he. Okay, I can't get the. What I was going to show you is a little video, unless he can. It was of me getting shot. Maybe we'll see if he can. We'll see if he can play it. Okay, here we go. I still have the bullet and the cartridge. It's like he told me to suck in my gut and hold my breath before he did it. He had me point to my belly button, so he knew where to aim, and but it didn't hurt. It didn't leave a bruise or anything like that. And when I flew home from Bogota, you go through security like 100 times to leave Colombia, and I thought, oh my God, I have a bullet in my pocket, and no problem. Nobody even noticed. And then, as right before we got on the plane, we got searched again, and I had the camera in which I had where the guy turned it on, and the photograph on it was that first one I showed you of the guy holding a gun. I saw that. Yeah, it's just, again, nothing. It was like, oh, we see this all the time. This is normal. But Bogota was actually great. It's fun to go to a country where nobody local thinks there are any tourists at all. So you could walk around as though you were a local, because I was probably the only tourist there. A question, anybody? What handicap? It's like 8 or 9 right now. It's been lower and it's been higher. Yes, sir. Oh, and I've made the mistake of not repeating the questions. There's the home club, how much does it cost to join, and how many members? We have about 200 members, individual and family. I think there are about 400 bag tags, including everybody. And the dues are, I think, about $2,500. It's an unusual club in that there are 3 parts. There's a tennis part, there's a beach club on a lake, and there's the golf part. And you can join them separately, but then you have to join this sort of overall thing. But I guess it's maybe $3,000 or something like that. My town is about half people who come on the weekends and during the summer from New York, and they don't play anywhere near as much golf as my friends and I do. So we are definitely the beneficiary. It's much cheaper per round for us than it is for some of them. Yes. Hal is right, and we've done that. He said it's lucky that we've kept this group together. We have for 20 years. It was started in 1996. still together, and young people come in, old people go out. And also that you don't need colored balls to play in the snow, which is true. When we played in snow that was 4 feet deep, colored balls did nothing because you had to find the hole. And as long as, the bane of of snow golfers is cross-country skiers because they muck up everything. And deer, whose footprints look exactly like golf balls. But if you listen and you look, you can find it, even if the golf balls are white. Anyway, thank you.